developers. Good evening. It's nice to have all you here again. And today we are going to talk about Azure fundamentals. This will be presented by Lucas Romão. And the same as our first live, we just answer questions that are asked in English, okay? This is just for us to really enjoy this session, speak a little bit, and interact with each other using the language, all right? So now I'm going to ask for Lucas to introduce himself and speak with you guys about Azure, okay? Bye.
Okay, thanks, Anna. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well? Okay, I will share my screen before we start with my self-presentation. Anna, can you just confirm if you can see my screen, please?
Yes, I can. It's all right.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for the invite, Anna, also Tamiris, also Angelo. Well, as Anna already said, this is a session where basically we will talk about cloud and Azure fundamentals. Okay, my name is Lucas Romão. I work for a company named N3 Results. I'm a cloud technical solution architect and also an MVP for Azure competence for the last 8 years, 9 years, since 2011. On my first slide, you can check some links like my user group or the user group that I manage, my Twitter account, and also my Facebook page. So feel free to follow us on all the social media, and also if you have any question around or about this session or anything related to Azure or Microsoft Cloud, feel free to reach me after this session. Okay. Okay, let's start about the main topic. Well, before that, if you have any question, please feel free to ask in the comments. If I'm not clear on my explanation, feel free to tell Anna, and she can advise me, and I can stop, and I can back, and I can try to explain again. Okay, I will not use a lot of PPT. Maybe I have 3 or 4 just for the main introductory topics, but after that we will move to the Azure portal and start to play with Azure. Okay. Okay. So let's start. Before we talk about Azure, we need to understand some basic concepts around cloud, where we name it is cloud models, because everyone that already work with in the IT field, or at least already working in some company where there is an IT area, you have a few servers, you have a few services and workloads running there. Sometimes those workloads are running inside the company that you are working. Sometimes it's hosted outside the company in a third-party data center, or sometimes it's a simple web application hosted in a different place. Okay, basically this kind of service or this kind of place, we name this area as an on-premises services. What it means? It means that everything that's inside your own data center, it's inside the data center of the company that you are currently working, is their responsibility. Since when you think to plan to buy a new server, or maybe to create a new environment, when you need to check how much costs a server, when you need to purchase a new server, and then we need to plan to receive the server, to install the hardware, to buy the licenses about the software that you need to have it installed there. Everything is your responsibility. So the first main model, and the first model that everyone who starts to work with IT is familiar, is with the on-premise. And we can understand it as that amount of servers that you manage, that all the responsibilities are from you or for your company. Okay. Not the only about the hardware and about the software, but also when we need we think about responsibility, we also need to think about maintenance, about support, about people that needs to take care about the local area, about the air conditioner, about the light, the energy that you need to feed the environment. So everything is your responsibility. So this is the on-premise environment. But when we start to talk about cloud, and doesn't matter which cloud we are talking, we need to have in mind that we are sharing responsibilities. So this slide handle exactly about it. What I mean is, here we have, for example, my second stack is about infrastructure as a service, or IaaS, where everything that is in green is not more your responsibility. This is the responsibility of the vendor that you are requesting the service. It means that everything related to network, related to storage, servers, and also for virtualization is the responsibility of the vendor. When translating it to Microsoft, it means that all of this is responsibility of Azure, not yours. But when we start to speak about operational system, middleware, runtime, data, and application, this is your responsibility. And when we think to convert this stack to a service, we are basically talking about maybe a VM, a virtual machine. So Lucas, what it means? Well, it means if you request a VM to Azure, to the Microsoft, it will deliver to you after a few minutes, then you request the service. But part of this responsibility is from Microsoft, it's from Azure, but the other part of the responsibility, it's yours. It means that since Azure deliver you a virtual machine with a basic operational system running, everything that will happen inside this VM is your responsibility. So basically, we are talking about all the updates around operational system or anything that you need to install or manage inside the VM is your responsibility. But in case you need to increase or decrease the size of the VM, that's virtualization related, or if you need to add more storage, or if you need to connect to a different VM, or maybe with your local servers, then this is not totally your responsibility. The main responsibility is from Microsoft. It's by Microsoft. So you just need to follow some steps and give the guidance to the service, and the responsibility to connect or to provide the service is from the vendor, is from Azure, and not yours. Okay, that's clear. This is IaaS, one of the main stacks when we talk about public cloud. My third stack is named Platform as a Service. Basically, we are talking about the same thing from the first stack and the second one, but you can see that inside my stack, the green area is higher. It means that the responsibility is higher for the vendor and lower for us. It means that when I request a service that's inside the Platform as a Service stack, I'm responsible only for the application that I'm deploying or I'm hosting and for the data generated for this application. Anything else is not my responsibility. This responsibility is all from the vendor. It means that not only network, storage, servers, and virtualization are responsibility from Azure, but also the operational system, the middleware, and the runtime is also responsibility from Azure. So, Lucas, I don't need to check if there is a new update, security update for operational system. Yes, you are right. You don't need to take care about it. You just need to focus to develop your application, to develop new resources and deliver more quality and more resources to your end customer. Anything else is not your responsibility. So, okay, so platform as a service, how can I translate it to Azure? Okay, well, you can host a web application, for example. We will see it during my presentation when I presented the Azure portal. Maybe you can use a platform as a service to use a database. Maybe you want to have a SQL Server database or maybe a MySQL database or a Postgre database. Anything, all of these resources you have the possibility to request as a platform as a service, or if you prefer to manage all those resources, you can also request as infrastructure as a service. Okay, I will show you some examples. If it's not too clear, feel free to send some questions. But basically, now we are just talking about responsibility, not about a specific research. I just mentioned some research to give you some examples, mainly for those who already know a little bit about Azure. But if you are not understanding the research that I'm saying, don't worry, we will see with more details after my those slides. Okay. And my last stack is named as a software as a service, or SaaS. So basically here, you don't have any kind of responsibility. Anything that we have on this stack is responsibility from who is providing the service. It means that you can start to use a service like Office 365. It means that you don't need, for example, to install a SharePoint inside your own data center, or maybe install an Exchange server inside your company to use an email service. You can request access to Office 365 and contract Exchange Online and start to use at the same time the service. So all uh, all the items inside of this stack is responsibility from who is providing the service. In this case, about Microsoft. So it means that when I request a software as a service, the time to market, the time to start to use a service is simultaneous. I don't need to wait a long time before you start to use the service. For example, let's compare my first stack and the last one. If I have my own data center and I need to provide an email server or an email service to my company, and I'm starting to build my own infrastructure. So I need to request some details about servers. Maybe I need to request 3 different codes from different vendors, maybe to request to Dell, to IBM, and HP, maybe, and say, hey, vendors, how much costs a server with this configuration? And then I will receive the proposals. I need to analyze. I need to request some approval for the budget, and then I will proceed with the purchase. After the purchase, I need to wait some time to receive the server, and then I need someone to install the server, and then I need someone to install the software, and then I need someone to set up the environment, and then I will be able to provide the service. This is the timeline that I have for thinking in an on-premises service. But when we talk about software as a service, basically I need only a credit card. For example, if you open a browser and type office365.com, at the same time you can choose which kind of offer do you want. If you need a simple service, or maybe a layer like E3 or E5 that you have some additional resources, you just need to include some personal data like your name, your email, your mobile phone, and the data regarding your credit card. and then at the same time, or maybe after a few seconds or a few minutes, you have access to the same resource, or at least for the same service that you are trying to provide using a local server. But at the same time, anything that is running inside there is not your responsibility. It is the responsibility from the vendor. It's already provisioned almost at the same time that you requested. So always when you talk about software as a service, we are talking about something that's already done. You just need to consume. So we can think about software as a service as some service that we need to use inside our company, but maybe you already have an application, you want to turn it as a software as a service to provide to different people that maybe you never have thought that you could touch. What I mean is, maybe in the past you had an application where you need to send some CD for install, or maybe who is older like me, some discs, some flop disks. I don't know, maybe why not? And then you decided to join in the cloud, and you decide to create a new application using the same knowledge that you already have about the business, but thinking to expand your business. And then you decided to create a cloud application, and you don't want to manage an application for each of your customers. You want to have a single application, and you want that anyone that wants to use it, doesn't matter where they are, they can simply join on your site, contract your service, and start using. And you just need to take care about the new implementations, the new features, maybe create a new roadmap, maybe expand more your business, or create a new business. You don't need to take care about different environments for specific customers. You need only to create a single environment, a single application for all of your users. And then you can use the resources inside the Azure that are inside infrastructure as a service and platform as a service to build this kind of application. What it means? It means that Office 365, for example, use some components that are inside the Azure. Why not you can develop your own application and create this same kind of motion? Okay, so basically that's the difference. When we talk about on-premise, we are saying that everything is your responsibility. When we move to the cloud, you start to share some responsibilities. So here we are talking about infrastructure as a service, that basically we are talking about virtualize some servers. Then we can move to a platform as a service where you need only to look for your application and data. And when we talk about software as a service, you have two options. Or you consume some application that's already available, like Office 365, or maybe you can develop your own and offer to the market. Okay? Any questions around this, Anna?
Yeah, let me check just a second. I don't think so. No, we don't have any questions yet, but if we do, I will tell you, okay?
Okay, thank you. Okay. On my previous slide, we talked about on-premise environment, and then we start to move to the cloud. Okay, so when we talk about cloud, there is some different types of cloud. So probably when you are listening some presentation or reading some article, probably you already heard about private cloud, hybrid cloud, or public cloud. Okay, so what it means private, hybrid, and public? Basically, when we talk about private, we are talking about our own data center. It means that all the stack regarding on-premise, it's regarding your private cloud. All your hardware, all your software, all your data center is your private cloud. When you move to a service like Azure, we are talking about public cloud. It means that there is a vendor providing some kind of service, and you can request access to the service, and then we can request some resources to consume in different ways. Okay, but when we link both sides, the private and the public, then we have the hybrid. And the hybrid nowadays is one of the most common scenarios that we have. At least uh, on my daily basis when I'm talking with customers in general, we have people connecting their local environment with the public cloud, or at least planning to move part of his local environment, part of his private cloud to the cloud. And then we have the hybrid. Okay, so this is only to clarify some concepts in case you never heard about it. And now let's start to talk about Azure. When we talk about Azure, or maybe when we start to talk about public cloud, we need to have in mind some specific points. Because cloud, uh, it, it's a topic that's hype nowadays, right? Anyone provide cloud services, everyone want to be in the cloud or provide some service in the cloud. But when we talk about public cloud, there are some basic aspect that needs to be observed. For example, the availability about the services. When we talk about public cloud, one of the main point is, doesn't matter where you are living, doesn't matter where you are trying to access, you need to have access to the service. For example, this is the map about the availability of Azure around the world. So basically we have three kind of points on this map. The first one is the available region. So we have 54 different regions worldwide. It means that we have 54 places in different continents and different countries where I can request some service. What it means is, now I'm in Portugal. I'm not in Brazil. I'm living in Portugal. But if I have a customer in Brazil, I don't need necessarily to create a service here in Europe. In fact, it doesn't make much sense depending the application that I want to provide, because I have the factor about the distance. So if I deploy some service here in Europe, my customers that are living in Brazil, probably they will have some issue about distance. Maybe my application will not be performing so well. So if I have customers living or consuming my service in Brazil, what makes sense is to deploy my application here in the Brazil South region. That makes sense? It's the same if I'm providing some services for some customers in Japan. Why not deploy my application in Japan? Doesn't make sense to deploy it in Europe or even in South America. Okay? So this is the first aspect. I have a subscription in Azure. I want to deploy some service. So I am the owner of all my contact about all my resources. So if I want to deploy something in Asia, North America, South America, or Europe, I can, and I will. If it's the best choice or not, this is a different topic, but I can if I want. Okay? The other bullets is about the announced region, because Azure is always expanding. Okay, so the main concept about the Azure team is to provide the service for the biggest number of people in regions and countries around the world. So we always have some new regions being announced and new regions being released, and always moving forward. So for example, for now, we already have announced 2 regions in Africa, for example. Microsoft Azure is the first public cloud service to announce a data center in the Africa continent. If I'm not wrong, there is another another vendor that's already announced something in Africa, but Azure was the first one. It's not available yet, but it's already announced, and soon we will have access to data centers in Africa. So we have two different regions already announced and not in production yet, but we will have in the near future. We also have for Azure some regions or some data centers that are not available for the public customers. That those regions or those data centers are named as government regions, that only the government in the US have access on those regions, those data centers. So if I want to deploy my application inside the US government, Iowa, central US, I'm not possible. It's not allowed. Okay, and this is the same for China, because the kind of government that China has, Microsoft is not the data center is not from Microsoft. It's a data center from the state, and it's a completely different way to request access. So if I have a subscription on Azure and I want to deploy inside the data center in China, I need to request a different access to the data center in China, and it can be accepted or not. So there are some exceptions when using Azure, but it's not necessarily about the service, but it's some kind of particular reasons, like, oh, it's a data center focused on the government, it's not for public customers, and another data center is because the government, that the government in China doesn't allow everyone to have access on that. Maybe they will check what do you want to deploy there. Maybe they have some kind of restrictions and they need to have some control inside the data center, but that's how it works. And if you need that, we need to play the game. We need to request and see if it will be accepted or not. Okay, and why we talk about region and not about the data centers? Because when we talk about region, we are saying that we have at least 2 data centers on each region. Lucas, it means that in Brazil South, we have more than 1 data center? Yes, you are right. We have more than 1 data center, or at least 2 data centers in the Brazil South. Lucas, there are more than 1 region in South America? No, not at this time. Only 1. And when we check inside the Azure portal, it's named as Brazil South. But I don't know why, but it's not in the south of Brazil. In fact, it is in the southeast. It's in the São Paulo state, not in the south, but in southeast. Both data centers are one closer the other. So, well, that's it. The other information that we have on this slide is about the available countries. Why this information? Because sometimes we have a few countries that doesn't have his own region, but they have access to Azure. It happened with Brazil in the beginning. When Azure was released in production 9 years ago, or when it was announced 10 years ago, we have no plans for a data center in Brazil. Only after a few years, we got our own data center. But since the beginning, we are allowed to have access to Azure and to consume the services. So in the beginning, anything that you want to use about Azure, we need to deploy outside Brazil. And after we have our own data center, we could move our workloads to Brazil and start to deploy inside the country. Okay, it makes sense? Okay, let's move. This is a big picture about the services inside Azure. So probably it's not updated because every month or every 2 or 3 months we have new releases. When we talk about new releases, it means that sometimes we have new resources added, sometimes we have some improvements or some new announcements, but we have some big blocks of resources uh, that's easy to check inside this big picture. For example, if I have a web application or a mobile application, there are some resources that I can use, like web apps, API management, notification rubs. If I want some kind of analytics and IoT, this is another group that I have. Data, as I mentioned it on my previous slide, we already have SQL database, we have Heads cache as a service, we have MySQL database, Postgres database is also available, and many other resources. What we will do after my next slide is to check the Azure portal and start to create some resources and try to understand better how it works in practice. Okay, so this is only to have a big picture about the main resources inside Azure, but of course we have hundreds and hundreds of resources, and I will show you how to check everything that we have inside Azure. Okay, beside that, or before that, a last comment about how to start with Azure, because always when we talk about Azure, people start to ask me, hey Lucas, how can I start with Azure? What's the best way to start? It's possible to have a trial subscription, or I need to pay monthly. There is a specific fee per month or not, how it works. So basically, Azure is based on subscription. So you need to have a subscription. Doesn't matter which way you choose, but you need to have a subscription. And everything inside the Azure is based by consumption. It means that if you create a resource, you will pay for that. And each resource has a way to calculate this amount. So it means that a virtual machine inside Azure is different when you have a terabyte of data storage. Each component, each resource has their own way to be calculated. And maybe we can have some examples during this presentation. Okay. Okay. But talking about subscriptions, what are the main subscriptions available? The first way is to create a trial subscription where you can have access for 30 days or $200, if I'm not wrong. So if you spend $200 before the 30 days, you'll be invited to move your subscription from the trial to a paid subscription. If you don't spend all the money, after 30 days, you will be also invited to have a paid subscription. And when I say a paid subscription, is if you consume, if you create some research inside the Azure, you will be billed in the end of the month. If you have a subscription and do not create any research, don't use anything, you will not be billed about anything. And what are those subscriptions that I listed on this slide? The first one, benefits, MSDN, education, etc. There are a few ways with Microsoft that you can have access to Azure without pay anything. Of course, it will depend the benefits. Some benefits you can have $50, maybe you can have 200, maybe you can have 6,000. I don't know. It depends. But there are some ways. The most common is the MSDN subscription. When you are a Microsoft partner or when you buy an action pack, any kind of MSDN subscription, you have some credits available. And it may vary between $50 and $200 per month. Okay? It means that if you expend only inside this amount, that's fine. You don't need to pay anything else. If you expend more than this cap, more than this amount that's provided every month for you, you will pay only the difference. It means that if you have a credit if you have $50 per month as a credit, and in the end of the month you spent 75, it means that you need to pay 25 to Microsoft. And in general, it's paid using a credit card. Okay. The other way is you can create a pay-as-you-go subscription. That basically everything that you buy or everything that you consume during the month, you will pay in the end of the month using a credit card in general. Okay, so it's the one of the most common kind of subscriptions. You just need an international credit card, and then you can create your subscription and have access to all the resources. Okay, the third one is the enterprise agreement contract. That's a 3 years contract that you need to pay upfront. It means that you need to define with a partner, you need to talk with someone inside Microsoft or with some specific reseller from Microsoft, and you need to pay upfront a certain amount, and then you have big packages of credits. In general, this kind of subscription are for companies that really need to have a big amount of Azure, or sometimes they have a big contract with Microsoft, and then they can include the Azure or not. You don't need to necessarily have an enterprise agreement contract specifically for Azure. You can include some license like with Windows Server, SQL Server, and many other products from Microsoft, and also includes some amount of Azure on this contract. Okay, but there are some minimum when we talk about value to have an enterprise agreement contract. And in general, the payment is upfront and the contract is for 3 years. So you really need to make sure about the amount of Azure that you need to use or that you are planning to use for the next 3 years before to sign this kind of contract. Because beside that, you'll be paying for something that will not pay, or you'll be paying for something that will not be using. Okay, and the last one is about the CSP. Yes.
Yeah. Before you speak about the last one, I just want to say that Rodrigo Cono asked you to explain about Azure for students, because maybe it's a common question that anyone knows, you know?
Okay, Azure for students. It depends. I'm not sure if I have all the questions, Cono, but for example, there is Office 365 for education. So all the universities that are currently using Office 365 for their students, there is another benefit about Azure. That's $100 per student that they can request to the university or about the school. This is one of them. And also there is another way where the teachers can request some kind of access, but you will not have access to the entire platform, only for some developer resources. And in general, is to motivate the students to compete inside the Imagine Cup. That's a worldwide event hosted by Microsoft. For those who never heard about Imagine Cup is one of the main events with focus on students. There are some different categories inside this event where you need to develop some kind of application, and then you have some regional competitions, and then you have the main competition where you can buy some money and maybe you can travel to a different country and be recognized and meet with some important people inside Microsoft, etc. But back to the benefits for students, Kono. I don't remember all the details. I need to double check about it, but I can share the link after this presentation. But basically, at least $100 you have access. It's easy to request to all the universities or colleges that has the academic incentive with Microsoft. If you know some university that have interest on that, but didn't have it, you can tell me and I can show you how is the process, or maybe indicate someone inside Microsoft to help you on that. Okay, sorry to not have all the information. Any other question, Anna, around the kind of subscription?
No, for now that's the only question.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And the last one is about the CSP, that is the cloud solution provider. So we have hundreds of Microsoft partners that are CSP nowadays, and basically they are your main contact before you have your own Azure subscription. It means that you don't need to manage your subscription. You don't need to pay directly to Microsoft. And why it's important? Basically because we don't have local billing for Azure in Brazil. It means that if you want to create your own subscription using a credit card, you need an international credit card. So in the end of the month, you pay in dollar. And then you have some extra taxes like IOF. And the amount this month probably will not be the same the next month, because we have the variation of the exchange month by month. So the most secure way to contract Azure nowadays is using a CSP model, where you will pay in local currency. It means in reais. And then you have a partner from Microsoft that will manage your subscription. It means that you don't need to necessarily take care of your own subscription. They can do it for you. They can support you. And only when necessarily you need to scale inside the Azure team to the Azure technical team. Anything before that is the responsibility from the CSP. And the main important points here is about the support, that before you request support to the Azure team, the CSP is able to help you, and also the help that you can have to manage your own subscription, and of course to pay in local currency and pay in reais and not in dollar. That's the most comfortable way to use Azure nowadays. So if you ask me, hey Lucas, what is the best? What do you recommend? I will say CSP for sure. Okay, that's fine. We talked a lot about the basic concepts. At least I spent almost 50 minutes talking about lots of theory. Now it's time to move to the portal. But before that, I would like to show you the main Azure website, where you can find anything about Azure, all the documentation, all the explanation about all the resources. Okay, so if you want to know more about Azure, azure.com, and you will have access to this website, and here you have access to anything. Okay, let's see what we can check here. There's something important to show you. One of the things that I like to show about Azure is about transparency. It means that you have visibility and you have access about anything on Azure. It means if you have if there is some kind of issue inside Azure, you will know. The Azure team will let you know. You can have visibility in real time inside the Azure, and you don't need to have access to a subscription to have this visibility. For example, if you type here in support and then Azure Status Dashboard, let me open a new tab. Look at that. Here I have visibility about all the regions, about all the data centers. So I have Americas, Europe, Asia, Pacific, Azure government. And then I have a legend here. Good, warning, error, information. It means that I can check the health about all the resources inside the Azure. Sometimes you are using or you have deployed some application and you are seeing that something is not going well. Maybe your application has stopped, maybe you're not having access, and you start to investigate. The first thing that you need to do is go to this website, to Azure Status, and check if everything is okay with the data center, with the region that you are hosting your application. After that, you can investigate inside your own environment. For example, if there is someone managing or deploying something new, check if someone tried to make some update or deployed something new. Sometimes you haven't tested in the proper way and you need to hold back your application, or maybe some other thing that you have changed could create it or generate some issue, or maybe you need to check the logs and see what's happening. Okay, but this is a really, really good way to check if everything is good with Azure. And sometimes if you are not comfortable, you need to check the history, to check if something happened last night or maybe during the weekend while you were offline. So then you can go here in status history and check anything that happened. And then you can choose by product, you can choose by region, and maybe about date. So you have the history for the last 90 days into the most recent. Okay, perfect. Let's go back to the site. And now I will log on my own portal, and I will show you some things that we have inside the Azure portal. Okay, so basically, when you already have your subscription, you can click here into portal or maybe in sign in, and then you will have access to your private subscription. So let me log here. Oops. Okay, so here we are. This is my Azure portal. Anything that I want to create inside the Azure is inside this screen. So here I have access to anything about I already have created, or if I want to create something new. Okay, so let's explore a little bit the main portal, and then we can create some services. For example, here I have access to my main directory. For example, if I want to check some details about my subscription. So here I have the email account that I'm using and some details about this account. Here I have some settings. For example, if I want to choose the theme, the color of my portal, the language that we are using. You don't need necessarily use English. I can switch to Portuguese or a different one. So there are a lot of languages that are currently supported, and you can switch anytime that you want. Um, Here I have an area for some kind of notifications. It means that any service that you create or you change for some reason, you will get some updates in this area. Sometimes when you log on Azure Portal and there is something new, sometimes some new resources that were provided or released, you also get some notification here. And here you have some you can apply some kind of filter. For example, you can have more than one subscription inside the same email ID. So I'm using Lucas Romão at hotmail.com. Not necessarily I have only one subscription. In my case, I have more than one. I have 3 different subscriptions. I have one named Microsoft Azure Sponsorship. I have one named Cloud Architects, and a third one named Visual Studio Enterprise. Lucas, what it means? It means that I have a certain, all of these 3 subscriptions, all of them are subscriptions that I got from Microsoft for some reason. For example, Microsoft Azure Sponsorship, this one came from the Azure team because as an MVP, they gave me this subscription with some amount of money to spend. Okay, the Cloud Architects is the MSDN subscription that's linked with my MSDN subscription as an MVP. And the last one, the Visual Studio Enterprise, if I'm not wrong, this one is linked with with another MSDN subscription, but it's related with my MCT certification. It means that as a trainer, I also have access to an MSDN benefit. It means that for 3 different reasons, I have access to Azure. And then I have some ways to verify anything inside my subscription. I can select all, and then I will have access to all research that I already have created inside the Azure. Let's see if we can see some changes here. I selected one of the resources, for example, app services. Okay. In here, there is a column named subscription. In here, you can see, look, I have a resource named Abigail Records that were created inside the subscription named Cloud Architects. But I also have another app service created inside the Microsoft Azure sponsorship named Azure Experience. It means that I have 2 different resources that were created inside the same email ID, but inside different subscription. Of course, it can cause some mess, some confusion. So the best way to manage all the resources is to apply some filters. For this reason, I always prefer to select the subscription that I want to work, and then I will have visibility only about those resources. For example, I choose Cloud Architects, and inside Cloud Architects, I only have 2 different resources. One of them is blog Lucas Romão, and the other one is about Abigail Records. But if I change for Microsoft Azure sponsorship, then a new filter will be applied, and all the resources related to this subscription will be listed here. Okay, so talking about your organization, this is really a good tip to manage all your resources. And when you can use this one, for example, sometimes you are managing more than one subscription for different customers, or maybe you have more than one service and you want to manage those services in different subscriptions. You can do it. You can do anything that you want. You can proceed. Doesn't matter how do you want to proceed, you can choose the way. You can have some different subscription to manage different applications, or sometimes you want to manage all your applications inside the same subscription. You can do it as well. Okay, that's fine. Let's see. What else I have here? On my left side, I have a bar with some resources listed and with 4 items that are fixed on this bar. The first one is related to create a resource. It means that if I hit this option, it will open a second window where I can choose the category of the resource that I want to create. For example, I want to create some resource that maybe is under the compute umbrella. Okay, I can hit compute and then try to see what is listed here. But maybe sometimes I don't have this, I don't know exactly where it is the service. So I can research inside the marketplace. So let's try, oops, sorry. Let's try web app. Just type in web app, and then anything related to web app will be listed here. It means that I have a single web app, I have a web app bot, I have web app plus SQL, I have ASP.NET started web app, and a lot of other available templates. What I'm trying to show you here is that not necessarily I need to already know where I need to go to find the right resource to be created. Sometimes I can proceed with some resource. For example, maybe you have read or checked some video that say that you can create some WordPress environment. So I can research about WordPress. And I can see here that I have a WordPress environment that's available inside web, sometimes it's inside compute, or maybe inside containers. So I have the same kind of resource, WordPress, inside different categories, different resources inside the Azure. It means that this WordPress is inside a virtual machine. This other one is inside web app. Okay, so depending the way that you want to proceed, you can choose this resource and proceed with the setup of the environment. Okay, okay, let's continue to explore here. And then I have dashboard. Dashboard basically is like your desktop for your Windows client. You can create a few different dashboards to manage some kind of research. For example, I have one here named Sponsorship Azure MVP. So I have 4 items that I have already created some time ago, and then I decided to pin those resources on this dashboard just to have an easy visibility. So instead to choose one of the resources that are listed on this bar, I can simple open the dashboard that I want and have access to this specific resource. So I can create many of them and I can have access to all of them. Look at this one, Dashboard Azure. There are a few other resources pinned here. What else? Let's see, all services. Here I have all the resources available on Azure, all the resources that I can create or have access listed here. And I can filter, type in the name here. I type in something like web, and anything related to web were listed here. And then I have the option to mark the star. And anything that is in yellow, it's already listed on this bar. So for this reason, I can customize this part of my bar with the main resource that I want to have access. Okay, so for example, if I want to have access to a virtual machine, the classic model, for example, I could choose here, and if I check, it's already listed here. And then I can move inside my bar. Let's put it in the end. If I came back here, and I try research for virtual machines again, I can remove virtual machine classic from my list. Okay, so this part of the bar is totally customized by yours. You can list everything that you want to have access. Okay, but let's try to create something inside the Azure portal. Let's start to talk about web application. Okay, I will give you an example. This is one of the web applications that I have created recently. Basically, this is a web application. So I have two ways to create this environment inside Azure. I could create a virtual machine. This virtual machine could have an operational system with Windows Server or maybe Linux, depending how I want to create my web server. And after creating my virtual machine, I could set up my web server and then deploy my application in the database, etc. Okay, but instead to have a virtual machine, I can use one of the resources that we talked previously on my presentation, that's under the platform as a service umbrella. And this resource is named App Services. Inside App Services, we have a resource named Web Apps. That are all of these that are currently listed here. So what it means? It means that if I have an application, it doesn't matter if you have an application that is developed in .NET, Ruby, PHP, Java, etc. Azure App Services support many of different solutions in the market. So on this example, I will show you many of them that are currently supported. So basically, what are the processes to create this new resource? I need to select App Services, for example, and then I can hit Add, or I can came here and create a resource, or maybe in All Services, and apply all the filters that I already demonstrated to all of you. Okay, but as I already have it on my favorites, I can hit App Services and then click on Add, and then here I can start to choose which kind of template. Here, what I need to do is I need to choose one of the templates that Microsoft can provide me. Doesn't matter. In fact, doesn't mean that Microsoft is the responsible for all the templates available here. Sometimes we have templates that are provided and supported by third parties. Okay, for third-party vendors. So the same example that I gave you before using WordPress, I can show you here. We could, I can type WordPress, and it means that all the templates that contains WordPress is listed here. What do we have here? The first one, the name of the template is WordPress. The publisher is the WordPress, and it's available inside Web Apps, as we are talking. But this one is running over a Windows server. Okay, but some people say, hey, Lucas, I don't like WordPress running inside Windows Server. I prefer to have it running inside a Linux server because WordPress is built with PHP and I have more performance with Linux, la la la. That's fine. So we also have a template with WordPress running on Linux. So you have the capability to choose if you want to run this platform inside a Windows server or maybe in a Linux platform. But now I'm talking about a specific resource named WordPress. That is a package that you can choose, and then the virtual machine will be created, the service will be created, and you just need to set up the WordPress. But it's not the case. On my case, I'm building my own application. I have my own web application. I just want to create the resource, and then I need to have access to this environment to deploy my application. So then we can create some you can create the resource, but using the basic configuration. For example, here I have the first option that I have here is a web app. This is the basic one. You don't have any templates inside this web app. Basically, you need to inform all the details about this web app before you plan to deploy something. Before you say if it's a .NET application, or PHP, or any other language that you are using. Or maybe you want to create a template that's a web app without any product previously installed there, but you want to have some kind of connection between your web application and a SQL server inside the Azure. You want to have this kind of link between both resources. It's also possible. Lucas, it means that if I create a web app, I can connect my SQL database or my MySQL or any other database with my application. No, it's not right. Of course, you can connect with any of service after you create the service. This is only if you already know, or if you already have your database, it can help you to link both services. Okay, but for our example today, let's use the most basic one. So I can select the web app, and the first panel that will appear for me is a resume about the resource that will be created with some kind of information, and then I can only hit the create button, and then some specific questions will be requested for me. For example, first of all, the app name. This name needs to be unique on all the data centers inside the Azure, because it will create your DNS. The name of your application is different when you have some host service from some resellers in the market, that you need to have your own domain, and then you need to deploy your application, and then you need to link your own domain to the server and to the DNS servers that your host provided to have access, and you need to duplicate this information, so then you have access to your application. Here with Azure, the first thing that you do is to provide a name. When you finish to create the service, you have access to your application at the same time. For this reason, you need to have a name that needs to be unique. For example, if I try to create a new resource named Blog Lucas Romão, I can use that. Why? Just because this name already exists. If you try to access bloglucasromão.azurewebsites.net, it's already running inside Azure. So as my service needs to be unique, you can use the same name. So if you include some additional letter, yeah, maybe it's available. Let's create something new aqui. Temo Lucas, for example. There is no app services running under this name, so I can use. It's already validated. The service is not running inside any of the regions with this name. Perfect. The second thing that they request me is, what subscription do you want to create this service? By default, he bring me Microsoft Azure sponsorship because I already had applied some kind of filter here. But if I want to choose for a different subscription that I also have access, I could choose on this list. I will keep it on the same, and then they will request me to create a new or use an existing resource group. What it means, a resource group? Resource group is a concept inside the Azure where you can manage all the resources inside the same block. Let me try to explain better this point. For example, you are creating some environment for an application to HR or for the marketing area. So you will have a web application to the marketing area, and this application will use a database and maybe a virtual machine, and a storage account. So you have 4 different resources specifically to be used for the marketing area. Okay, so the concept is anything that is related to this same application or sometimes related to this specific area or specific for some specific group, you need to create inside the same resource group. Why? Because it's easier to manage, it's easier to identify, it's easier to know how much it costs to your subscription. And also, and maybe the most important for the people from IT, it's easier to give access for people that need to have access to this environment. And when I say have access, is not thinking about have access to the application properly, but sometimes you need to give access for a DBA or maybe for a developer or for someone that needs to get some maintenance to this environment. So you don't need to give access to the entire subscription. You can give access for a specific resource, or maybe someone uh, maybe the owner of the company wants to know exactly how much costs an application. So it's easier to understand how it costs to the company. Or maybe the final cost about Azure need to be splitted between the areas. This is the way or the easiest way to understand all of those things. So in resume, it's easier to manage it. It's easier to give you access for people that need to have access to manage the resources. It's easier to know the costs, etc. So it's a good practice to always that you create a resource or a group of resources. Always you selected the same resource group. Always. So in this example, I will start with the web application, and then we can create a database. When I create a database that will be used for this web application, I will use the same resource group. Okay? So you can create some templates for resource groups. For example, I like to use the same name for my main object inside this resource group. For example, for this resource group, my main object is the web application. So I can keep using the same name, Demo Lucas, and then I can include some identifiers. In my case, I will use RG as resource group. Okay? Simple like that. So I know that when I check the resource groups that I already have created, one of them will be named Demo Lucas that is related to this web application. Okay, so I also mentioned that I could choose between Windows Server or Linux. As we are creating a basic web app, this is the time that I can choose Windows or Linux. In this case, I will create a Windows environment, and then I can decide if I will publish it using my own code. I have the code and I will publish. Doesn't matter if this code is on my own machine or maybe it's inside Azure DevOps, for example, or maybe on the GitHub. I can link with different services, or maybe it's a Docker image. Then I can also link with an image that can be inside my own repository, or maybe in a repository outside Azure. It's also possible. Okay. In this case, we'll use my own code, and then I need to define an app service plan location. What it means? It means that now is the time that I need to choose specifically the size of the machine and where this application will be hosted. So let's create a new one, and I will show you how to proceed with that. In this case, it's the same process than the resource group. As I already have some service plans created, I could choose an existing service plan, but in this case, let's create a new one. And then It's the same process. I need to give a name, demo Lucas, and I proceed with the same identifier. So instead to use RG, I use SP as service plan, and then I can choose the location. So here I have access to all the regions of Azure that has web app or app services available. So let's try, or let's create the service in Brazil South. Lucas, all the services inside the Azure are available in all the regions? No, not necessarily. Okay, sometimes we have some resources, mainly about the new resources that are announced. Sometimes they are available only in the main regions, and after sometimes when the requests are identified, when the Azure team see that it's a certain number of people requesting this service, they can expand. Okay, so the main resources of Azure, of course, are available in all the regions, but some specific resources are not available in all of them. Okay, in this case, Azure Web Apps, if I'm not wrong, is available in all of them. At least I don't remember some region that doesn't have access to our web application. Okay, so I choose the location as a Brazil South, and then I need to choose the pricing tier. And the pricing tier, of course, is not related only about pricing, but also directly related to the size of the VM. Okay, and why? Because the size of the VM. Because Azure Web Apps, the cost of Azure Web Apps is directly linked with the size of the resource. So as higher is the size of the machine, higher is the cost of the service. Okay, this is the first metric that we need to pay attention. So basically we have three different categories here. First one is dev test. So as the name says, it's not for production, it's only for dev test. Okay, so we have three different layers here. We have F1, D1, and B1. Basically, B1, that's the best option, or at least the one that you will perform better, has 1.75 gigabytes of memory, okay, and costs $68 per month, around this amount. If you want to choose a lower capacity, you have an infrastructure that's shared. It means that it's not dedicated to your application, and you have 1 gigabyte of memory, you only 240 minutes per day of compute. It means that you can test your application during 4 hours between 24 hours. After, if you try to use your application, your environment for more than 4 hours during 24 hours, you will not have access. You need to wait to complete the 24 hours to have access to more 240 minutes. For this reason, it's dedicated to the dev test environment, not for production. If you are planning to host something to production as if you have an application, or maybe you have some institutional website, you need to look first for this layer, for the production. Okay, and then you have some different size of VMs, and then you can choose the best that fit for your workload. Of course, there is some resources that we can be using to test our environment, that we can check specifically what's the best option for us. We have load tests, we have how to check the performance using a single user, with 100 users, with 1,000 users, and or more. Okay, let's choose one of them just to complete the process. So let's start with the S1. After choose the option that I want, just need to select apply. And then now I have the name of my service plan, the location, and the pricing tier. And then I can hit OK. And for the last, I can also enable or not the application insights to get some insights about the behavior of my application, to understand how the users are using my application, and how my application, the correct term is skip it now, but basically how is the behavior of my application. I can get some insights from the application and try to improve the performance, improve the usability of my application, and deliver something better to my end customer. Okay, so I will not enable this option because we will not check it for now, and then I can hit create. After that, Microsoft Azure will validate all the information that I provided. And after a few seconds or a few minutes, we will have the resource created. Look, the validation was created. The progress of my deployment, I received a notification here on this little bell, as I mentioned in the beginning of the Portal presentation. If I select the deployment in progress, I could have access to my to what's happening inside Azure. Probably he will show me what resource is being provided, what's being created, and whenever. But for some reason, he's saying that the information that I haven't saved, I will lost, so I will keep here to not lose time. And let's see. Look, the last one is deployment to resource group. So it's creating the resource group, and probably after that, he will show me that the web app will be created properly. If you want to test on your side, you can try to type demolucas.azurewebsites.net. And apparently, it's already deployed. Let's see. Look at that. demolucas.azurewebsites.net. Okay, your app service app is up and running. So of course, this is a template web page that is available just to show me that the resource is running. So after a few seconds, when I submitted it and I requested, as I already said, I'm in Portugal. I requested the service in Brazil, and it's available. So if I have some service here, or if I already have my application here, I could deploy my application. I could connect or link this environment with a GitHub, or maybe with Azure DevOps, or maybe I could use a service like FileZilla and simple copy and paste my application inside this environment, and I will have access to it. Okay, let's move here and let me show you some details about this environment. First thing that I want to show you is that we created a resource group, right? So one of the items that I have listed here on my favorites is the resource groups. And if we look for Demo Lucas RG, this is the resource. If I hit him, all the resources that were created inside this basket, inside this maybe folder, container, doesn't matter the name that you want to use, but inside this group will be listed here. So they created, when I requested a new web app, 2 resources were created. One of them is the Demo Lucas App Service Plan, and then the service properly. That's the place that I will host my application. What it means, what is the difference between both? First of all, the service plan is the power of process. It's the virtual machine behind the service. Okay, so I'm using web app. I don't have access to the virtual machine because I as I presented, when we talk about platform as a service, the responsibility to manage the virtual machine, the operational system, and anything inside that is not mine. It's from Azure. So, okay, that's fine. I don't have access. But of course, we have a virtual machine behind the service to have the capability to process all the information or to host my application, etc. The unique difference is that I don't have access and I don't manage it. But the virtual machine exists. And this resource represents the virtual machine properly. Okay? It means that I can have one single website running inside the service plan. But if I create a second web app inside the same service plan, I will have two different websites sharing the same power of process. It means that if you currently have inside your own company 5, 6, 7 applications running inside a single server, you can have the same environment inside the Azure. So if you have a local server with 2 procs and I don't know 7 gigas of memory, you can create some service plan inside the Azure with the same kind of configuration and migrate all the applications for the same service plan, and you have the same environment that you had on your local data center. That's the concept. Okay, so one of the tips is be careful, because sometimes when people start to migrate some web applications to Azure, they start to create some service plans for each of the applications. And in the end of the month, it's more expensive than what they are using on their local data center. And it happens, why? Because they deploy different applications with different service plans. So if your plan is to have a unique machine to host different applications, do the same inside Azure. Create a service plan and host all your web apps inside the same service plan. Okay? It's clear? I hope it is. Let's move forward. And as I have explained, the demo Lucas, in this case, this app service is my web application properly. Okay? So if I choose demo Lucas, all the details about this environment will be loaded. So we can double check, for example, the status is currently running. It's inside the resource group Demo Lucas. The location is Brazil South, the same subscription. And also I get some information like what if I want to connect this environment using some FTP service, I can have access. I have my credentials here. I can reset my published profile and then provide a new password to use a FileZilla, for example. That's the service that I like to use. I also have my URL to access my application. And here I have the definition about my service plan that we just talked. So this web app is running under the Demo Lucas service plan, and the size is this one. And I can choose the size. I can increase or maybe decrease the size of the service plan. And another thing that you need to be careful is always when you change the size of a service plan, if you have more than one web application running under the service plan, all the applications will have impact because you are changing the size of the server. So, of course, all the applications that is running inside the same service plan will be impacted. Okay? So be careful when you decide to decrease the size of the service plan. let's see what is more important here. Well, you have dozens of resources here that you can manage your application. You can link with different applications, maybe with a network, an internal network on Azure, or sometimes with a network outside the Azure, etc. But let's talk about scale. We have two different ways to scale the application. We have scale up and we have scale out. The scale up basically is to define a different size for your service plan. Okay, so for example, I choose the S1 size. I can maybe move for an S2 and I can apply. When I choose a different size for my service plan, it means that new resources will be added. If I came back to the overview page, they choose it for a standard 1 medium. Okay, and then I came back to the previous size if I want. Okay, so this is the scale up. You can choose the size of the machine. You can add more resources or you can remove resources. This is a vertical scale, but we can also plan some kind of horizontal scale. It means that not necessarily I need more power of process. Sometimes the size of the machine is enough to process all the requests, but the number of the requests that I'm receiving on my machine is higher than I can support. So then I have a different way to scale my application. That is to include more instances to receive those requests. What it means? It means that once I have deployed for the first time, I'm currently using a single instance, a single virtual machine behind the service. And all the requests that I'm receiving is being processed for this single instance. But when I know that this number of requests will increase, or sometimes you started some marketing action and you think that you can need more instances to process all the requests that you will receive, or sometimes you want to create some process and ask to Azure manage the number of instances that you will have running for your application. This is the right place to manage this kind of situation. What it means. For example, the size of the service plan that we are currently using allows me to up until 10 instances. It means that I will have 10 VMs running at the same time with the same application and receiving all the requests. But by now, if I move manually the number of the instance, doesn't matter how many requests I receive for my application, I will have the same amount of instance. So I have no control over it. I can simply define the number of instances and it's available. Doesn't matter if I have 100 requests, 1,000 or none. All the 10 instances, all the 10 VMs will be running. And how Azure manage all those instances? I will have a single endpoint that people will be accessing my application, and then Azure will manage and decide which instance this request will be routed. So basically, Azure will check what instance will be more available and then redirect this request for that specific instance. Okay? The good point here is, if I know the number of requests that I will receive, Or if I want to manage it manually, that's fine. I can increase and decrease the number of instances manually. But sometimes, or most of the case, I have no idea how many instances I will need. Sometimes, or at least using the good practice, I already had tested my application. I already had some load tests or performance tests inside my application, and I know the behavior of my application when I receive 100 people accessing simultaneously my applications, 1,000, 10,000, whatever. But sometimes I don't know when it will occur. I know the behavior of my application. I know how many instances I need to attain those numbers of requests, but sometimes I have no idea when it will occur. So I need to have some kind of process inside Azure to avoid that my application will be unavailable. It means that if I have 100 people trying to use, my application will be available. If I have 10,000 people, it will keep up and running properly. And this is possible using a resource inside Azure named Outscale. And how it works. Basically, I need to define some metrics. Okay. And how it works. I need to add some rules and tell to Azure how they need to perform, or how they need to proceed according with some metrics that I will request. For example, qual criteria I can define? Let's choose, for example, maximum when say about time aggregation, and let's say about CPU percentage. Okay, so using this metric, it means that during 1 minute, when I defined that the average of the CPU percentage were greater than 7%, they need to take some action. For example, I can define that while my application is running over 7%, a new instance need to be added to my environment. That is the rule. Let's recap. I decided that the criteria is when my application or when my this environment achieve the CPU percentage over 7%, Azure needs to increase by 1 my application. It means that after 1 minute, after a few minutes running over 7%, a new instance will be allocated to my environment. So after that time, a second instance will be running besides the first one to be able to attend all the requests that I've been receiving. That's fine. That's fine in the point of view when I define to have more resources available to attend the requests. But the main point here is probably after some certain time, I will need to have another rule to decrease the number of instances. What it means is for certain time, I will have lots of requests. But for some reason, this number of requests will decrease. So I also need to have a different criteria, a different rule to decrease the number of instances. So I can use the same kind of criteria, but instead to have a threshold of 7%, I can define a threshold for 30% to decrease the number of instances. So by now I have 2 rules. The first one says that when my application run over 7% of CPU, Azure automatically will increase by one instance. I will have a second virtual machine running. After some time, if both instances is running over 70%, a third instance will be added to my environment. And then a fourth one or more. I can define the maximum number of instances. But by default here, after 70% running for a certain time, a new instance will be added. And the same rule were created, but by the opposite. It means that when I have a CPU percentage running lower than 30%, they will decrease one instance. What it means? It means that I have now 3 instances running and receiving all the requests that I have. But for some reason, all the 3 together has 30% or less of the power of process. What Azure does is they isolate one of these instances and then they destroy one of these instances. And then after some time, I will have only 2 instances running to receive all the requests. And maybe I can define that by default, I will have only 1 instance running. So after some time, if both instance is running with 30% or less than 30, Azure will do the same process that I previously mentioned. They will isolate the second one and then destroy the second one and keep only a single instance up and running to receive all the requests. It's clear?
Okay, Lucas. Just for the record, we are a little bit over our time, and I don't know if you are finished already, but I will ask you if we can, we can open for the questions and then we can finish later. What do you think?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's okay?
Yeah. The process of scale out basically is that. If you
Okay.
want to open for questions, feel free. I'm okay.
Okay. So, guys, does anyone have any question about the Azure fundamentals, scaling, app, and everything? Yeah, nobody said anything. I don't think so. Some guys are just complimenting you about the presentation, that they liked it, and I think that's it. If anyone has any question, we are giving you guys about 2 minutes to make it. Otherwise, we are going to finish. Okay. Well, Lucas.
Hi, Anna.
I think that's it. People are not asking anything, but In name of DevelopersBR, I'd like to thank you for your time, your availability, your content. It was excellent, and I learned a lot, and I'm sure that everyone watching this session also learned a lot with you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna, for the opportunity and for the space. And count on me if you have any other um, opportunity.
Yeah,
Please let me know.
okay.
Okay, thank you, everyone. If you need or if you have any other question, please feel free to reach me on the social medias. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Lucas. Thank you, people. We are going to finish, and follow us on Facebook and Meetup to know about our next meetups, okay? Bye.